Here's one. King David. They said King David is supposedly this huge empire, this great monarch who ruled over this fantastically large empire. There's no evidence of him. He must not have existed. He's a myth. He's a fable. He's just a story that's been made up. There's no such proof that he existed anywhere else in anybody else's documents. And this is where we get into one really interesting question. Throughout history, what do cultures tend to document best? Their victories or their losses? Their victories. During the reign of King David, did everybody else lose to David or win over David? They lost. Is it possible they just didn't want to document a whole lot of that? They just didn't put much reference to that? It's possible, but until we found some evidence, they said no, probably not. He just didn't exist. New York Times, November 16th, 1993. Reports the finding of an inscription, Tel Dan, in northern Israel by Dr. Avraham Baran. It was a big stone monument. It was a stone monument written by a Syrian king. And the Syrian king was celebrating a victory over the house of David, a descendant of David. And he writes about celebrating this victory over the house of David, possibly Asa, when Ben-Hadad was king of Aram or the king of Syria. I see my journey people nodding. See? Chronological Bible. Possibly at that time. Isn't it interesting? There it is. Acknowledgement of the house of David. That the kingdom of Israel comes from the house of David. And in what form does it come? Is it because someone's admitting that David beat him? No, it's somebody writing about a victory they had over the house of David. It's the only reference they can find, but there it is. They found other evidence since then. But again, this is an extra-biblical source. This is the king of Syria who had a lot of contact with the house of David, talking about the house of David. Again, there's the New York Times citation. Oh, good old Gemariyahu. You all know him, right? The son of Shaphan. Surely you know Shaphan. That's like, isn't that some kind of, what is that? Was that? Yes, soap. That's not what I was thinking of. All right, who is this guy? Here he is. Jeremiah 36. From the room of Gemariah, son of Shaphan, the secretary, which was in the upper courtyard at the entrance of the new gate of the temple, Baruch read to all the people at the Lord's temple the words of Jeremiah from the scroll. When Micaiah, son of Gemariah, the son of Shaphan, heard all the words of the Lord from the scroll, and it goes on. Okay, here's this reference, this obscure reference to this individual. People said about the book of Jeremiah that it's full of these obscure references, and they said he's just making it all up. These people don't exist. And you would think, in fact, that would be a pretty safe bet, because finding reference to this nobody, this secretary, this person that doesn't have a lot of impact in history, you'd think you're pretty safe there. Except for the fact that in 1982, the Jerusalem Post reported the finding of 51 baked clay pots, which confirmed the name and reality of Gemariah, son of Shaphan, a scribe. Same name, same son, same time frame. You understand? When you're reading about Jeremiah, you're not just reading nonsense words. These people that are mentioned really lived. They really existed. And there's evidence in other places that they did. It also mentions references to Baruch, son of Nerihu, scribe, confident and trusted friend of Jeremiah. We see a lot about Baruch. He goes throughout the book of Jeremiah writing in the scribe. There's references to him in these clay pots. References to him as well. In fact, in England, they're claiming that they have a seal, that one of the things they found was sealed with wax. And there's a thumbprint in that seal. And they believe that it is Baruch's thumbprint. How's that for evidence? We are now getting fingerprints of these biblical characters. How cool is that? You can find out what crimes he committed. Run them through the database. Baruch. So Jeremiah called Baruch, just one example of the scripture, son of Neriah. And while Jeremiah dictated all the words the Lord had spoken to him, Baruch wrote them on the scroll. Then Jeremiah told Baruch, I am restricted. I cannot go to the Lord's temple. When you read Jeremiah, Baruch's the guy you have to thank for being able to read it. He's the guy. We know that the guy who wrote the original manuscript was a real person. Wasn't made up. Wasn't a myth. Daniel and Belshazzar. This was such a favorite. Daniel is such a big story, and it's so chock full of references to people. And it's got this king of Babylon named Belshazzar at one point. And everybody in the world said, we got you here because we know who all the kings were. We have dated and timed all the kings of Babylon, and there is no Belshazzar. Doesn't exist anywhere. In fact, the time that you're claiming that Daniel was written, the king was a guy named Nabonidus. No Belshazzar. Daniel made a huge mistake. Even if you believe Daniel existed, he's big-time error here. Scripture's not reliable. In fact, in 1854, a British consulate found some Babylonian clay cylinders in Iraq, which, by the way, Iraq is Babylon. Sir Henry Rawlinson, world-renowned expert on ancient Babylonian writing, and when it says world-renowned expert, let me explain to you, Sir Henry Rawlinson is one of the guys who first translated Babylonian writing. When they first found it, he's one of the guys who learned how to translate it, so he's definitely an expert. He confirmed that these writings confirmed that the king in 555 to 539 was Nabonidus. And everybody went, see, we told you. But it also confirmed that Nabonidus chose not to live in Babylon during this time, but instead in Arabia, for who knows what reason. So it tells us in these scrolls that he delegated rulership of the kingdom of Babylon to his son, Belshazzar. That gives me chills. Isn't that cool? Because nobody knew about Belshazzar aside from the Scripture. Do you understand that? This is not just confirmation. This is confirmation the Scripture was there ahead of everybody else. Nobody else had heard of Belshazzar. They find these things, these transcriptions. They're just reading through it, and they're like, Nabonidus, yeah, we know that. That confirms everything we've known. But then they find this extra information that for this period of time, he chose to live in Arabia, not in Babylon, and he delegated rulership to his son, and his son's name is Belshazzar. And everybody, all the skeptics went, darn. That's cool. Now listen, this is awesome too. Think about this. This is interesting. Because archaeology here also amplifies and explains something in Scripture that has been a puzzle. It says, then at Belshazzar's command, Daniel was clothed in purple, a gold chain was placed around his neck, and he was proclaimed the third highest ruler in the kingdom. This was always confusing in Scripture because Belshazzar was the king. And he said he would appoint Daniel his right-hand man. Why is Daniel not second in command? You know why? Because Nabonidus is first in command, Belshazzar is second in command, and Daniel's third. It fits. How cool is that? Even when we didn't understand what Scripture was saying, it was right. We better hope that's usually the truth, huh? How about Sargon, king of Assyria? No Sargon. Who ever heard of Sargon? That sounds like something from Star Trek. There is no king of Assyria named Sargon. There never has been. There never will be. And yet it says in Isaiah 20, in the year that the supreme commander sent by Sargon, king of Assyria, came to Ashdod and attacked it and captured it. And the truth is, no other ancient manuscript or archaeological find ever mentioned anywhere the name Sargon as king of Assyria until 1843. When Paul Emile Botta discovered the palace of Sargon. Not just a document, not just a stone, not just a scroll, but the very palace. Complete with winged angels and horses decorating it and the name of Sargon all over the place. King of Assyria. In fact, the inscriptions there do kind of what that last thing did for us with Daniel and Belshazzar. They explain some things about 2 Kings 17. We're not going to go into it. But 2 Kings 17 talks about a battle that they had with Sargon, and the inscriptions on Sargon's palace not only confirm it, but actually add information which is completely compatible with what Scripture says. Omri. Omri is one of the kings in the Old Testament. Let's see if we can get this to stay. Omri is one of the kings in the Old Testament who had some dealings with Moab. He was at war with Moab pretty significantly. And again, they said, there is no Omri. There's no Omri, there's no Omri, there's no Omri, there's no Omri. Until they found this. This is called the Moab stone. It's a stone they found in Moab. And it talks about, again, a victory over Omri. It talks about how Omri's dynasty is wiped out, which does happen after Omri defeats Moab for a while. Once again, interestingly enough, we don't find evidence, we don't find inscriptions, we don't find them putting up monuments to their defeats.